Dear all, hello, good afternoon. I welcome you to the roundtable discussion at Vytautas Magnus University, which is organized in the framework of Transform for Europe project, and it is a part of the Mobility Week. About 50 students from 7 different countries gathered in Kaunas these days to attend the course with a much promising title, Critical Heritage. It promises that we speak and think about heritage as a past made present in some special critical way. This public discussion is titled Why to Think About Heritage Critically, and is intended to further problematize the concept of heritage and our relation to it. Now, let me introduce the participants of this roundtable, who are also visiting teachers and contributors of this course. Some of them you already met in this room. Others will have their lectures in coming days. So, let me start from my dear colleague, Professor Vaidas Petrulis from Kaunas Technology University, who is architecture historian, the best expert on Kaunas modern architecture, who is also initiator of various cultural activities, one of which was his involvement in the whole program dedicated to Kaunas modernism within the Kaunas European Capital of Culture 2022. Next to him sits Professor Mart Kalm, who is architecture historian from Estonia, in recent years focusing on the architecture of collective farms in Soviet Estonia. Currently, he is also a rector of Estonian Academy of Art. Then there is Dr. Giuseppe Grimaldi from the University of Trieste, Italy, who is a social anthropologist doing a number of research projects on migration, borderlands, and heritage. It's also my pleasure to present Professor Jerzy Gorzelik from University of Silesia, Poland, who is an art historian interested in relation between art, heritage, and different group identities, also in heritage and borderlands issues. And the last, but not the least, is Dr. Adam Hajduga, who is a heritage practitioner, enthusiast of industrial heritage, a vice chair of International Association European Route of Industrial Heritage, and a deputy director of a museum of metallurgy in Hajduga, recently established. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to participate in this roundtable discussion. And let's start now. We have 3 questions on the table from my side, but I believe we will have more from our wonderful audience. But I will take my privileged status and will ask first question, which of course will be crucial. What is critical within critical heritage from your perspective? Often critical heritage is understood as a separate, quiet, new field of practice and research, reconceptualizing the very notion of heritage. But now I want to ask you, what is the meaning of this critical is for you, for your practice, and for your research? Please share your thoughts or some examples or your experience in working in this field.
Mart generously gave me microphone, so probably I can start. And with starting talk, probably I can put this question in a very simple manner. For me, when we talk about heritage, I see two main issues, is value definition and authenticity. And in both cases, actually, you can address the critical approach. And especially I'm focusing on 20th century architecture as Mart and probably some others. So when you talk about 20th century, especially the second half of the 20th century, obviously there is a lot of questions regarding value. The definition of value is incredibly complicated because if we treat traditional notion of heritage, the most beautiful, the most important for national narrative, etc., etc. So in most cases, the legacy, which is not defined as a heritage yet, the legacy doesn't address all these issues, and still we have this legacy. So the first question is how we define value and who is represented by this value. And here is an incredible problematics. For example, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, where we are now, second half of the 20th century unavoidably related with the Soviet. So what does it mean for us? Is it ours? Is it not ours? Which part is ours? Where we draw the borderline? And I guess the critical approach, in a sense that we somehow try to be inclusive, try to extend the idea of heritage itself, not just to represent, as I said, most beautiful or national narrative, opens us for a big debate in this field. And other side is authenticity. Okay, if we agree by chance what is value, so what do we need to transfer this value? What is the attribute? Again, when it comes to 20th century, authenticity is incredibly complicated. In some cases, at the beginning, the intention was to build temporary structures. So we are approaching with restoration to them? I don't know. Even interwar period, which is actually raises not so many questions regarding value, at least in Lithuania, but if you just go into Putvinskio Street, and there is a funicular top to the hill, and there is a nice round corner building, maybe you noticed, with super ugly attic store. And I would say this is a consequence of understanding of traditional understanding of authenticity, because our law, our legislation tells that we are not allowed to add another store. So instead of having normal store, probably, which is not a solution, I don't know, but we have some ugly structure which is completely, I don't know, against architecture as phenomena. So again, if we are talking about 20th century, we are talking about very huge amount of buildings. And the question of authenticity might be also the issue of the debates. So I would start with some very simple points about value and the debates, and authenticity, and also debates.
Thank you. Maybe Linara has more sophisticated approach, but I agree with Vaidas that there is, in my mind, this is simple but functioning division, that there is traditional heritage, what almost everyone considers beautiful, palaces, castles, manor houses, cemeteries, and it doesn't raise questions whether it is heritage or not. But then there are more complicated cases, and approaching and understanding or interpreting these more complicated cases, this can be taken as a critical heritage. But even these for us self-evidently normal monuments, for example, if we take churches, there is for Christians, there is no question that the old church is heritage. But if we think about the growing population of Muslims in Europe, as much as I know, they don't respect them as a heritage because they are quite against them. If Europeans, Christian Europeans, go to Muslim countries, they are able to respect the mosques as their important heritage, but the problem is that the Muslims in Europe don't respect similarly our heritage. So there can be such a questions. And for example, in morning when I was listening to you, Adam, for me then raised the question whether concentration camps and gulags are also industrial heritage or not. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Wait, this question is it's very tough, but I don't have to answer. So, no, but in a way, I a little bit disagree with you about that a castle or like a monument is undoubtedly is heritage. I don't agree with that. I think that everything is disputable. Everything can be heritage or cannot be heritage at a certain point, depending on political situation, on a series of factors. So, and the question I would like to raise: so, if everything is can be disputable, everything can be a point of debate. So, what do we do? And what is the role of the researcher? And maybe anticipating what the colleague will say, I don't know, but it's about taking position. And I think as a researcher, we have the duty to take position. And if we know that everything is a social construction, everything is fruit of political, symbolic, social situation, we have to take position. And we cannot put on the same level like an indigenous claim for land and imperialist claim based on a shared past, let's say, like the example of Russia and Ukraine, for example. So we have to take position, and the history of heritage, in a way, I would say, the history of anthropology teaches us that there is a very important position in the discipline to take the side of subaltern and study their practice, their heritage, not as their remains, but as a way to liberate these people. And so I think that critical heritage obliges us to take a position.
Thanks. So the adjective critical has a few different meanings, yes? Not only in the language that we are using at the moment. One of them is dangerous. We can be in a critical condition. And sometimes I'm afraid the critical heritage, it's heritage in a critical condition. Of course, I agree with this definition, this way of defining critical heritage. So critical heritage from the very beginning was meant to undermine something what was called authorized heritage discourse. Yes, but actually I agree with one of the classics of heritology, Tonbridge, who criticized critical heritage, pointing out that most of the elements, most of the ideas that were incorporated in this model had been present from the beginning of heritology as a scientific academic reflection. What I'm afraid of, as far as all the critical approaches are concerned, is the exaggeration. So this imperative that you have just mentioned of taking a position, For example, you mentioned two narratives, colliding narratives on history, on the past. At the moment, we are watching actually how the resources of the past are used by both sides of the political and military conflict, yes, by Russia and by Ukraine. As a scientist, I'm not ready to take a position because both narratives are extremely simplified. Kievan Rus, from my perspective, wasn't any kind of nation state, Russian or Ukrainian. Yes, this is the Kievan Rus is a myth that can be involved in this nation narratives, master narratives. Actually, in this case, we have to do with actually with two authorized discourses because both discourses are backed by public institutions, by intellectuals, by educational systems. Yes, so they collide, of course, and. I want you to understand my stance. I'm not talking about political conflict, but about taking position in the conflict of two narratives that to some extent are similar, but of course the one occurs at the moment and the imperialist one. So the one is dangerous as a tool to subject the independent nation and to legitimize political claims and military aggression. But I think that as scientists we are obliged to be sober in such cases. Yes. It's not so to discern between this political level, the recent political situation, and the national myths, national master narratives. So, of course, it's very difficult to discuss this matter in such circumstances. But I think that it shows also that there are many traps while using this critical approach. Of course, it's less dangerous if you interpret the discourses elaborated in the past. Of course, these two that we've mentioned here are also of old origin. It's nothing new about this myth of Kievan Rus, Third Rome, and so on. But it's the very actual problem at the moment. But I'm researching, for example, narratives on the wooden architecture in Central and Eastern Europe, also in Russia and Ukraine. And of course, it's what can be perceived as belonging to this critical approach is that I'm interested in exposing the ideologies and the systems of values and distribution of power underpinning this narrative, these discourses. Yes, it's. I think that it would be difficult to talk about these discourses of art history, for example, or ethnology, without referring to these aspects. Yes, at this moment of the development of our self-reflection as art historians. But I, as art historian, I prefer to abstain from condemning some attitudes that were common at that time, and of course, sometimes they are still widespread among my fellow scientists. So strive for power, elitism, naturalizing and universalizing of your values. I think that these are phenomena that will not be overcome by critical heritage. In my opinion, critical heritage will produce new authorized heritage discourses. Yes, so of course there is a chance that there will be that's for more plurality. Yes, that's the right direction. But yes, I think that sometimes we face the attitude that is characterized by some kind of crusader zeal, and I think that somehow endangers our role as art historians, heritologists. So, to conclude, I think that many intuitions that are strongly accentuated by critical heritage were present from the beginning. So there are not some kind of innovation of critical heritage representatives. The accents certainly have been shifted, sometimes, in my opinion, too far. Thanks.
You know, to comment that as a practitioner is absolutely big challenge for me. So, but at the end, I would like to say that, first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation among intellectualists. I just would like to give you some practical overview for that. So, at the end, someone must pay for maintain the heritage. And to do it, you have to convince and build a bridge between intellectualists and decision makers. And this is what we are doing. I mean, we try to interpret and we try to attract the audience, simple people who would like to visit the sites, who would like to, you know, treat it as a part of their own heritage. So this is the first. Second, always heritage is a part of the policy. And from this point of view, all of those authorized narration which you've mentioned, it's very important because sometimes something which was absolutely underestimated after the 1 decade is one of the main topic from my point of view. And it only depends, once again, who pays for that. Because we know, especially from our region, that the heritage part of the cultural heritage, industrial heritage, which definitely used to be underestimated. Now it's a part of the main narration. Of course, with a lot of different questions. And try to answer for one of the toughest questions during this discussion, if the concentration camps could be the former German Nazi concentration camp. We are not talking about the deaths camp, but concentration camp only. In each site which I have visited in Germany, industrial heritage sites, there are always a part of exhibition about the forced labor workers. So from this point of view, this is the story about the modern warfare and the war and the industry, because industry at the time, of course, it was a part of the huge war industry. So even those kind of signs, of course, need interpretation and narratives. And at the end, this is a question: who will do it, and whose narration is? Thank you.
Thank you. I hear a kind of discussion among our presenters. So maybe we can continue discussing maybe each other's points or attitudes. Okay, my role is the role of moderator tonight, but actually we were discussing during the introductory lecture on critical heritage that criticality means at least two things. One is to ask political questions about heritage. Who, in which circumstances, for whom, and why makes something from the past heritage. And those silences are produced during this process as well. This is one question, and another feature which interested me most is the expansion of the field of heritage. It's not only churches, it's not only nice pictures and monuments, it is also industry, but not only industry. Now we are talking about waste as a heritage. We saw interesting artistic project about pollution as a heritage. And here I see the role of creative practices, the role of artists who can help us to think further what we treat as a heritage. What is, as Adam says today, in very convincing way, that industry is the most important heritage in our days, because it made the 21st century we live now. So it means critical heritage is about, it stresses that it is about today. It is a process which takes place today. It's not about past. And it is also about projections into the future. And when we do heritage, or when we analyze heritage, we are making some claims about the future, selecting some of them, and rejecting or sidelining others, I think. So, yeah, this was a kind of things we were discussing together with students yesterday. But we can continue on defining the notion of heritage. Vaidas talked about value and who decides. My question is, if we are critical about authorized heritage discourse, now students in this room, they know what this means. They had a little introduction on it. Jerzy says that critical heritage as a field, or even as a movement of scholars and also of practitioners, maybe also are producing new heritage discourse, and they are producing. The question is it becoming authorizing, I mean official, dominant, or it's just producing new narratives? Do we need these new narratives? And the question is maybe to start, who defines the value in heritage making process?
Yes, it's a lot of questions, a lot of points to react, and actually, it is really interesting question about value and who decides, and it is related with the idea of heritage as a product of, I would say, mostly 20th century civilization. And obviously we can talk about old, I don't know, antique wonders of 7 or how many of them, I don't remember right now. But if you talk about heritage as institutionalized process, the idea is that the concept is being developed by international community with ICOMOS, with UNESCO, with Docomomo, if to talk about 20th century, and until we will have these organizations, and until we will have such an idea that we have some charters like Venice Charter, like Quebec Declaration or whatever, and in a way the debate how we define value, how we understand the process of inheritance, it is being debated by international community, and since it have institutions as, let's say, ICOMOS, it will be always in a way top-down. Obviously, we can somehow raise the question that about the heritage as a phenomena. Probably it is just 20th century phenomena, and in 21st century we don't need it anymore. It's I think one of the possible ways where critical heritage leads is questioning the heritage as a concept itself. If we agree with non-institutional ways of treating heritage, so we can talk about heritage which is a part of a tradition and works in communities, and it's continues and develops, and it's not freezed somehow in a perfect moment which we are trying to preserve. So I think it's very complicated, and if we are talking about critical heritage, which is in a way of being new normal, new, it's not opposition anymore and becomes standard, maybe it's not yet. If, as far as I know the processes in e-commerce, there is a debate, but I wouldn't say that critical heritage taking the role, and but still a lot of documents, like as I mentioned, Quebec Declaration on spirit of a place. Spirit of a place is something which is, and it was in 2008, something which is, it's hard to define. It's not material, and the idea is to connect material in immaterial. So I think, and I like actually two quotes probably. One referring to your heritage about today, and the more I live, the more I doubt that it's about tomorrow. Tomorrow will decide for itself. But about today, it's definitely. And there is a very nice quote that past is a foreign country, below them. So obviously, we interpret something which doesn't belong to us. So how do we behave, how we do interpret, it's our decision. And every generation actually will make the decisions, and we make decisions. So probably it's a natural development. Critical heritage is a natural, I don't know, process of heritage itself. If we take heritage as modernism and heritage something, and then continue with postmodernism, so maybe some, I don't know, declarations of 80s and 70s. And now we are moving towards the diversity, first of all, and towards inclusiveness. I think this is the keywords, and but still, until it's governmental, until it's being paid by governments, by municipalities, it will be always, in a way, top-down. So I don't know the answer how to avoid this and how to look differently.
I see that in current world, the heritage is a kind of battlefield between different narratives of different groups. Everyone has a right for his or her own narrative about past, to create, to interpret past so that you make of it heritage. And partly I see a problem that if we, or whoever, can think about the past as a heritage, everyone can declare whatever as heritage. Probably I see a problem that the notion of heritage dissolves, disperses, fragmentize the society, and in the end nobody knows anymore what is heritage. And this, if it's so nice to interpret past and to create new narratives, but and of course we like it and we enjoy it. It's one part of our job, but finally nobody knows anymore what is heritage.
Thank you. And I totally agree with you on this. There is a dispersion of what heritage is. That's why, in my opinion, heritage is a battlefield where different epistemologies sometimes concur. No, you asked before who pays for this, but I think, in my opinion, sometimes it's even more difficult to have a commemorative plaque than the renewal of a whole industrial district, because that commemorative plaque would mean that who is in power at that moment had to acknowledge that he failed. He made a huge mistake, no? And so sometimes it's even more, it's easier to pay $1 billion than admit that your political, cultural, symbolic structure, it's a fake, no? So this is the first thing that we have to acknowledge. And the second thing is about the value, what you were talking about. And I don't agree with the scientific division that scientists should like there is a division between acting and studying. You know, the 20th century philosophers showed that the scientific posture, being disconnected from the world and something like this, it's a political construction itself, no, and it has a political purposes as well. So when we think and talk about heritage, we have to acknowledge absolutely the power dimension that are circulating on this concept, and specifically in this period when heritage is becoming a tool, a coach to build regional, national, or to reshape national identity, or to create regional identity, or to justify regional identities. So, and obviously, it's a political battlefield, and as a scientist, we have to acknowledge that, and possibly we have to fight if we have a political position, I think, as a researcher.
Okay, so first I would like to agree with the opinion that limits of heritage are very blurred, and the limits of heritology are very blurred too, because there are so many interpenetrating disciplines, approaches, memory studies, ethno-symbolic approach, and it would be very difficult to set very, very firm border between heritology and those fields, yes? But all of them actually focus on some phenomena of collective memory, its impact on our identity, its ideological background. So this blurred condition of heritage, it's not, sometimes it's a problem, a communication problem, but the object of the focus of our researches, I think it's quite clear. So now about this authorized heritage discourse, because I think that's one of the core ideas that let us discern between a classical approach and critical approach. So, in my opinion, critical heritage reflects, and here I would agree with you, the evolving system of values. But it corresponds at the moment to the dominant system of values. So it's very close to the idea of authorized heritage discourse. We are discussing the critical heritage here in this room. It's university, public institution. Most of us talk about critical approach affirmatively. Isn't it authorized discourse?
No.
It's public institution, yes? And I think that critical heritage, it's now in the academic world, it's prevailing approach. So, and academic world has great impact on public opinion. So, for me, it's a conflict between old set of values, old system, value system, and the new one. Yes? So the critical heritage refers actually to some very popular discourses, of course, that are sometimes contested by intellectuals, but that belong, in my opinion, to a dominant worldview. Multiculturalism discourse, for example. Of course, there are intellectuals like Huntington, who influential intellectuals who reject this idea, as they point at the tension between social cohesion and multiculturalism. It's maybe not very radical stance, but people like Huntington at least try to expose some weak points, yeah, some consequences. So, of course, I agree with you that there is no possibility to fully control our worldview's impact on our research. That's why we should always reflect on our own scientific opinions, yes, and the opinions expressed by preceding generations of scholars. But I still doubt if this direct political involvement, when you perform the scientist social role, it's the best solution. Also, for the best for the authority of science. Yes, of course, science is also power discourse, but as I told during my lecture, in my opinion, every discourse is discourse of power, and heritage is always about power.
Just give me to say one sentence that I leave this intellectual discussion to intellectualists, but my privilege will be, if you don't mind, to ask you one question at the end, okay?
That's all?
That's all I would like to say now.
Okay, this is a time actually for our questions. Yes. Continue with comments now, and when please raise hands. We have time at least for few questions from audience.
Can I have comment right now?
Vaidas now is commenting. Adam, you will have one question, but later at the end. Okay.
I don't know, I really want to react to this. Actually, we are somehow stating that heritage is political. It's absolutely obvious. There is no reason doubt, and what I think, it will remain until it will be heritage. And it will remain, it will be institutionalized. But what is the point of a critical heritage is to change the politics, to infiltrate in the municipality, in government, more diverse approach. And I think this is the reason why we discuss critical heritage, to be inclusive, to be diverse, not in just our circle, but to change the decision makers. So, but the structure itself, I'm not sure if you have to question, because if it disappears, there is no UNESCO, there is no ICOMOS, there is no cultural heritage departments around the world. Do we still have heritage? We will have past, but in a different form. So my idea is critical heritage to change the institution itself.
Just a very small comment to two things. First thing, let me do the anthropologist, and let's try to decenter our gaze. You know, when we talk about critical heritage, we know that this is a tool that is used worldwide. Now, from indigenous population to political movements in Southeastern Asia or in Africa. You know, so we have to acknowledge that critical heritage, it is now. Present day, it's a political tool. obviously, and it can be used in many ways, even to contest and to reject the dominant paradigm. Second thing, but very brief, I mean, Huntington speaks about cultural, the clash of culture, and we are in a, I mean, this is Transform for Europe. There are like 10 universities in here, and with most diverse origins or stuff like this, and you know, I don't think there is room for Huntington in here. I hope.
So that is a perfect example of cancel culture. I don't claim that I agree with Huntington. I mentioned him as one of the most influential intellectuals contesting, actually, this discourse that that is somehow interconnected with critical heritage. But of course, it's very controversial what he wrote, and what Fukuyama wrote, yes, about the end of history. But still, it's something that we should discuss on, yes. So, but what you told about Huntington, that there is no place for Huntington in this room, proves that critical heritage tends to produce authorized heritage discourse.
At least this.
I think I really know.
At least in this room, let's imagine that critical heritage is our discourse here as a space for discussion, debate, and negotiations. So now this is a time for questions from our fantastic audience, who is a little bit tired after a very intense day. Today we had 3 super interesting lectures, but I already see the first hand. Please.
Thank you, everyone. I have a question. Maybe it's more of a... Okay, I could... Okay. Where I can... Okay, I can stay there. The main one maybe is more of a provocation than a question, but we said that everything can be heritage, and it depends on a political will, on the political narratives. So it is discretional. And that, in my opinion, is strictly linked with social justice, intended as recognition justice. With this political will, which identities recognize through the recognition of their heritage, especially when we talk about minorities. And so taking in account that the researcher can, I'm not saying it has to, but can have a role in this process of decision. There can be a trade-off between social justice and the historical accuracy. It was clear?
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Who would like to start answering?
I try to say something. Thanks for. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thanks for the question. It's so appropriate, I think, because obviously it's a matter of social justice, and the way social justice is considered and worked now in the present panorama. Obviously, I'm an anthropologist of migration, and so I can see how social justice is totally, sometimes in certain occasions, is totally, how to say, I don't want to use an inappropriate word. I would say inappropriate in the way to deal with migration, refugees, and displaced people. For sure, I would say the critical heritage can be a tool to work on social justice and to the recognition of social justice. And this is what I said before, that critical heritage can be mobilized, and this is what it was done in the 80s. It's not a new concept, but James Clifford, an anthropologist, worked on the mobilization of Native American identities in order to claim territories. No? So it was a matter of social justice, but through heritage, no? through the appropriation and the revendication of an heritage that we know. It's a political construction. We know it's discretional. We know all of this, but we take position, we take side. And yeah, then I would like to hear the words against Huntington, not by me, but for example, by Biden. And in that case, I would agree with you on the cancel culture.
Probably just to add a case study, I totally agree with social justice. And in a conference last year, we had a very nice presentation in Kaunas by Sandy Hilal. He is working with a group DAR, and we proposed for UNESCO World Heritage Site refugee camps, which is totally inappropriate in terms of authenticity, in terms of the whole discourse, what is heritage as a phenomena, as a tangible thing. But still, it's interesting that the recognition of international institutions like World Heritage being on the list is still a part of the game. So again, it's in a way, I totally agree with social justice as an aim where we go, and sometimes maybe it might be problematic, as in case, for example, in Lithuania, do we need to represent people who live in Khrushchevkas? How we do this? Is it a social justice? Obviously, it's an open question for debate.
Or how about this Soviet kolkhoz?
One thing that social justices are not in singular usually. They can be conflicting also. And if you know, brought in the World Heritage Committee, then Vin and me, we have been there in the World Heritage Committee 10 years ago, 4 years sitting there. And I guess that the World Heritage Committee functions like most of the juries. That if it's architectural competition or whatever, best academic article in university, those whose articles or competition entries are competing, they are convinced that the decision what was made by jury is the justice. Justice wins always. But those who are in jury, they always know that this is kind of compromise between different opinions. And especially, maybe I was too naive, but this World Heritage Committee was quite shocking. It was a total political battlefield. We as a small post-communist poor country were very shocked when we fell under the permanent attack of the Third World, who considered us culpable. That we are part of the colonializing West, which we thought that we never are, but for them we immediately became of it. And it was permanent revenge for this colonial past, which we as a white people had to take. And inside this, and then inside the committee, there were very strong BRIC countries who always wanted to oppose to the European positions. There were inside these the World Heritage Committee delegations clear different inner dynamics. In our case, the ambassador was always in background, and there was a voice of experts always in foreground, and there were countries where the experts sat in the auditorium, and the ambassador was the only one who knew everything about heritage. So, and in this context, think what is World Heritage and what is not. Don't take it too seriously.
Thank you for some light mood. But do we have one more? Yeah, please.
Okay. Riina Radalu from Estonia. I just wanted to add to this social justice question one more concept, which is rights-based approaches or human rights-based approaches. And this is a way of thinking of heritage, which has also been worked in last 10 years. And in ICOMOS, there is a working group which is called Our Common Dignity, which should reflect the idea behind it. But the rights-based approaches is actually about making it clear who had the rights to the heritage. And in a way, it's like an endless exercise because you can bring more and more people and more groups to the floor. But this exercise actually helps to get into this social justice, that you identify either are they like local peoples, are they local business owners, or they are local inhabitants? Are they indigenous people? In gentrified areas, it might be also that the newcomers who have invested a lot of money. So this is a very, very good way how to get to this, to discuss about the social justice.
Thank you. For addition, any questions? Yeah, there is one.
Hello, I do have a background in education, and so for me, hearing about all this important information is quite significant, let's say. However, I am always wondering how are we going to get to the new generations, because new generations are kind of hard to engage into this kind of conversations. So when we are talking about heritage, they kind of don't understand what is that. So have you ever considered the new approaches or methodologies or ideas, alternatives of how to arrive to this Gen Z that is our future? Because it's getting harder. The attention scope of them is even shorter. And so that's one of my questions. And the other one is, I do not remember the name of the last professor. You were talking about the industrial heritage. And when I was listening, I'd never heard this worriness of you being considering how sustainable is maintaining this industrial heritage. So you were thinking about commercial, you were thinking about engaging people. And you said that when the people are asked to visit an industrial heritage site, they prefer other kind of destinations, like the competence that you were talking. So maybe I'm just thinking, because I'm always traveling and looking for these places, and I come from a country that we do not have these kind of sites because we are full and surrounded by nature. So when I go other places, I am much more keen on looking at nature landscapes or nature sites that come like all communities. So have the industrial heritage academia or people have wondered if you can transform these industrial heritage sites into a more sustainable sites? That's it.
Thank you. Two
questions.
Two questions about future, actually. It is a question about future.
I could react very shortly. Last year in Kaunas we had European Capital of Culture, and we had program Modernism for the Future, which was intended for interpretation of heritage of modernism, interpretation by different means of art, poetry, video, whatever you wish. And well, it was a try, at least, and I think some of the projects were successfully, but not about, my answer is not this. Probably the answer that processes are going on, but the answer to you, your generation will give the answer. We can't do this. It's you will come and you will do your interpretations. I think so.
Definitely, I can join to this answer that, you know, that for your generation is your heritage and your interpretation of this heritage. I will not allow to interpret heritage for you. You know better than this. I mean, you know, your needs. But try to answer about the sustainability of the sites. Yes, of course, there are a few projects. One which I know now, it's of course in rural area. It's futures, the Gardens of Futures. This is the program which will finish 2027. Three sites. The main one is in Dortmund. This is the cooking plant Hansa, and the concept of the third landscape. It's very, very popular. I mean, you know, to use once again nature, which recapture the industrial heritage sites, and, you know, take back what first we took from the nature. Yes, of course, there are. The other question is of the question of maintaining the sites. Of course, as a lot of different sites, please think about the Museum of Arts and the consumption of energy, different kind of energy, and, you know, the humidity conditions which you have to keep when we are talking about, you know, to keeping our heritage or from the ancient time, for example. So this is not only a problem of industrial heritage. Even we think that, you know, all of those old machines are fueled by coal, etc., etc. But each kind of museums consumes a lot of energy, really a lot. And so keeping heritage means also a lot of spendings also in this way. But of course, there is a big question, and in the Green Deal program, this is a part dedicated to heritage, cultural heritage at all. And for us, as I tried to mention during my lecture, that this is the one of the big challenge, how to use those old stuff, change the way of the way of driving them, like the weeding machines instead of coal. On the one hand, when you change this drive, it means that, you know, you completely change the authenticity of the place, of the relic. But on the other hand, maybe, I don't know, but maybe in the 50 years there will be not hard coal anymore. So in this way, when we try to present a steam machine without hard coal, of course it's possible. It's authentic or not. This is the big issue. But of course, in a nutshell, the sustainability functioning of the industrial heritage sites is one of the big challenge, and there are more and more sites which try to combine the nature and the culture, industrial culture, the one offer. Even Folklingen Iron Works, which I mentioned, there is a nicest part which is called Eden, and this is the answer that is possible to visit nature and industrial culture.
About the first question you made. in a kind of way, I agree with the other answer that the communication of how to transfer this concept is something we can't do simply because we don't have the tools. No, we don't have the capacity. At least I don't have. I mean, I don't know if there is someone who is expert in TikTok or something like this, but I don't think. But I think our duty can be to popularize these issues, to make them democratic, to make them, and we in Trieste we will try to do this from next semester with Professor Roberto Altin. We will arrange a laboratory. We will call it the Frontier Archive, and with the students we will try to make them think about what does it mean heritage, what does it mean cultural heritage, and how can, from their perspective, as Linara said in the first lecture, heritage can be your memory, can be something that your community, your small community have, no? And how can you can point this? And we will do this in university, yes, but we are creating partnership even outside of university with non-academic partners in order to popularize this way of thinking. And tomorrow, maybe in the lecture, we will try to do this, but I hope it works, because we never tried.
If I may, yeah. I got inspired of your comment about the energy consumption of museums. If we think now about the Louvre, Abu Dhabi, from traditional architectural perspective, fantastic piece by Jean Nouvel, great architecture. But if we take about the energy consumption, this museum climatized world under the Arabic sun, catastrophe. But it's not the whole story yet. A filial of Louvre in a country which culture is iconoclastic. Is it then cultural colonialism? Speaking there with the local university people, nobody have visited it, because why we should? Why we should go to the museum to look at pictures? Nobody looks at pictures. Although the exposition is composed in a very contemporary way from the perspective of global art history, it was not Eurocentric, etc. But still hugely controversial building from the perspective of climate issues, and then also culturally. Is it only for the meant for white tourists to propose them a place where to spend more money there? If the locals don't value it? Very controversial thing, and in my mind, a good topic to discuss. We have, with Anu, we have spoken about it, how good it is to discuss with students in museology and critical heritage studies.
Yeah. Good question. Any other questions from the room? Yeah, please.
Hello, everyone. So I have a question to Professor Adam. You gave a presentation about the industrial heritage. So we took a flight to Kaunas from the southern Belgian city that's called Charleroi. I don't think if you know it or not. But it was termed as the ugliest city in the world by just some Dutch newspaper, if I'm correct. So, but when I went to the city and explored about it, then I got to know that it was a flourishing city during the Industrial Revolution, and now it has so many abandoned factories, buildings. So, but people think that's ugly, and media is also playing its role in that thing, and. Yeah, and about the economic factor, currently the economic unemployment rate in Belgium is 6%, but if you compare it with Charleroi, it's 20%. So people are migrating also. Instead, they could make it an industrial heritage site. So what do you think? What could be the methods?
let me say that I don't know the answer. I know Charleroi very well. Yes, of course, it was one of the foci of metallurgy, and of course, the Wallonia, whole of the region, was one of the region where the mining industry was very well developed, of course, many years ago. And when we are talking about Belgium, let give me some more. That, of course, at that time, I mean 50s and 60s, on the 20th century, this part of Belgium was definitely wealthier than the north part. Then when the industry collapsed, everything was switched, and something like in Italy between the north and south, the big debate started. Yes, of course, when you compare the unemployment rates, this is not only a case of Charleroi, this is also a case of towns in Upper Silesia. In Italy, we definitely find the same, and in different countries, the same. There is no simple answer. Maybe we should agree with that there are, as I mentioned during my lecture, that a lot of sites will be demolished. A lot of sites it's not possible to protect. Maybe the solution is that what colleagues in North France did, Nord Pas-de-Calais basin. But at the same moment, because this is the same coal layer, like in Wallonia, in Nord Pas-de-Calais, it was the same year of description. The 4 coal mines from Belgium, from Wallonia, Bois de Ligue, Bois de Cazier, Orny, and one more, and Blenny. When was it in France? So unfortunately, I don't know. I don't know that the answer. What I just only add is that, as always, I work with politicians more than 20 years, and at the end, there is a discussion if they would like to listen to you, if they would like to, because usually, sorry that it's recording now, so that yes, so I try to be diplomatic. That usually heritage is not the most important concept for them, but it depends on the situation in the country. Sometimes this is a big asset to doing a politics, like we have now in Poland. Never ever before, after the communist collapse, 1989, the amount of spending money for heritage and museologists, a lot of things, was so high, since the maybe 80 years when we have the national government from the right side party. So back when you start to talk with politicians, and even they are interested in the topic, at the end what they expect, a lot of people inside, because this is the symbol of success of the site. Not how huge is the budget to maintain the site. The site must be big, and a lot of people must visit it. And the interest usually is finished when you open the site. And then this is the whole story with the heritage. Sorry, my dears. This is usually how it is. And never ever, maybe if it's a big event, the high top politicians will visit the site. Otherwise not. And this is, from my point of view, this is the biggest problem. How to convince and how to put this very important intellectual discussion and approaches into the operational, common daily activities and practice. And unfortunately, once again, back to Wallonia, there is no answer, or you have to spend really, really a lot of money, as colleagues from the rural area did. But there were, and still there are, a lot of doubts. It was necessary, because now the cost of maintaining such a huge heights is very, very high. It's getting higher and higher every year. And at the end is the question, it was worth to do it, because we should know that when we are talking about the public sites, the public heritage sites, there is no balance between incomes and spendings. Always you must subsidize this kind of sites. I don't know, maybe Louvre not, but when we are talking about the other department of Louvre, I mean Louvre-Lens, definitely they must pay more than they collect from tickets.
Deindustrialization has caused lot of decline in many places, not only in Charleroi. One of the simplest, the first ideas how to overcome is that let's think about our industrial past as a heritage. And from Europe, there are in World Heritage list, I guess, more than 10 former coal mining and coal processing places. And when we were then in World Heritage Committee, it was really a problem that these European industrial parties, one of the most overrepresented types of heritage, like the German Baroque palaces and French and Italian small, tiny medieval towns. So these were the most overrepresented types.
May I add something? So the possibility of demolishing even the most spectacular old buildings is inherent to the concept of heritage. Yes, because heritage means negotiating between very different values: economic, social, cultural, political. So I think it's very comfortable to accept the concept of heritage as essentially intangible, because if you demolish something within this framework, it means not erasing of heritage, but adding a new layer of heritage, new meaning, because every intervention, even the act of destruction, it's a new meaning, yes? That will be vivid in our memory. Our reaction to this act also is the new layer of heritage defined as process, cultural process, or as the meanings that are effect of this process. So sometimes we hesitate, it's my impression, between two models, heritage and monuments conservation, preservation. So, of course, I'm art historian. I'm very fond of old industrial building in Upper Silesia. So I will try to prevent them from, or I've tried to prevent them from being destroyed. But I can realize that my stance results from my personal experience, from my education as art historian. But there are other stakeholders, and even it's very, very often the local community. They want to have more in this place, not this old, ugly building. Yes, and maybe it's so certainly. From their point of view, it's reasonable. And if we want to operate within the heritage paradigm, we cannot accept that only this art historian perspective or museum director perspective is the decisive one. Yes. So we have our arguments, but we have to negotiate, and we have to accept that there are a different type of argumentation that we sometimes we have to admit. So that's a point.
But haven't you discovered that our arguments are usually most convincing?
I hope.
I just wanted to add a little comment. You just provoked me about two possibilities, destroying, either preserving. There is one very nice concept by Caitlin De Silvan of curated decay. It means you can leave abandoned. And from the first point of view, it seems pointless. But when we talk about what we do expect from the city, one of the theories is that we should have a whole range of emotions, including some, I don't know, being not only nice in nice, happy environment, but also in decaying. And the decaying process might give a lot of interesting research field for biology, for any other reason. So, third way possible.
Thank you. Now we have time for one last question from the audience, okay?
I was going to go in the same direction about destruction and not destruction, like preservation. So I'm gonna leave my friend. She's really passionate about this, so she wants to say.
Hi, I'm Alexandra. I'm from the University of Alicante, Spain. And I am going to talk directly to six of you. At this moment, you are taking position in our history, and therefore you are collaborating in the process of critical heritage, and also, even though some of you, I think, don't fully trust the process. So, I'm going to be direct. You have the tools, you have the intelligence, and that's something evident. I'm young, I'm a student, I am passionate, and I'm willing to be like you, so you are a referent. But the thing is, you're playing a great role game because you are all playing your parts, you are being diplomatic, funny, economist, but you are in the right to do that, and I'm not criticizing that. But I don't understand, why do you try to be to defend the absent speech, some of you, while you are taking the role play of the contradictor of good causes? You are playing like some of you, or some comments are like being the devil and trying to play with people like me or like us who are passionate about this and who you think that you can play with us in a good way. So I vaguely remember something one of you said about a speech without innovation. I'm sorry to say that in this way, but I'm going to be direct. In my opinion, saying that sitting there is not innovative, because I've seen that. I've heard that, we all have seen that, and you have seen that. So the thing is, you have the tools, you have the private cars and the public cars, you have the intelligence, you have the public citizens. So I don't understand why you try to be like that and not being clear in that way. And I'm going to conclude really quick. I think that with tools, intelligence, people like us, people like you, people like them, most of you, I really believe that, you are capable to make diamonds with water. So I don't understand why you're trying to be so diplomat sometimes, so plain sometimes. I don't understand, and I think most of us think the same way as me, because we are all practically the same age. So to conclude, the questions are, don't you think scientists have the duty to report the information objectively despite their opinions or their beliefs? It is not possible to make a remix, combine values and intelligent tools and people and intelligence. Again, sorry to repeat that. I think that it's a little bit demagogic trying to have a diplomat conversation and a diplomat immunity while you are defending and saying things in a weak political speech. So I think that you could really answer all of these, and we can debate like for hours. But if anyone wants to say something clear and easy for young people, I would really appreciate that. Sorry.
Thank you for your comment.
Really, I would join and say thank you for your comment, but your comment actually just show us how heritage, our topic, we gathered to discuss and to learn about and to share, is a politically very much loaded process, performance. Don't forget, yesterday we were talking about that it is a performance. And if it is a performance, there are many roles and many actors. And for me to talk also politically in my role, because I am in a role of moderator, of teacher, I'm in a privileged role, of course, sitting there. I'm in the light, you are in the dark. So many things. But for me, this criticality is to acknowledge, it is about acknowledgement that it is political. It is very much loaded, and loaded not only because political parties, not only because Putin or other bad guys is using heritage as a political weapon in our days, and we are facing it, but also because I see many other actors who are making their roles. And what I am impressed most in my job, for example, there are young generation cultural activists living in deindustrialized areas, also here in Lithuania, who are doing their work, which we would call grassroots or bottom-up practices, and at least in Lithuania, I see that it is growing, and it makes me feel happy because it deals with social value of heritage, which we are very much linked to sideline or forget. I'm art historian. Usually I don't consult, with lay public about how to understand picture or whatever. But it is very much connected to social value, to community building, to sense of a place, to belonging, and other very, very important things. So I see this potential, this grassroots, or maybe we do not need to deny this top-bottom approach, because UNESCO's and ICOMOS will not disappear soon, and maybe we don't want them to disappear soon. But this interrelation between more grassroots approach and this top-bottom approach, they have to come a little bit, closer to each other. And I see the role of young generation as a crucial, actually, role, because when we make heritage, we select something for the future and abandon something or kill something for the future.
I was intended not to talk, but you gave me a microphone, so probably I just to a mouth. So.
Someone,
but I can react. Actually, I really appreciate your passion, first of all, and I think it's crucial, and everything.
We have not only answering everyone to you, but then we have also Adam's question.
Vaidas comment and Adam's last question.
Okay. So I think, first of all, I think it's the most important that you have this passion, and we came when we were young with a passion, and everything is changing, so you will bring something new, and it will be your new approach, and it's perfect, it's fine. Just wanted to react, but we are still when emphasizing this grassroots, this bottom-up, anyway, and in very different contexts, not in Lithuania. We just recently listened to one really nice lecture in London from Jamaican who were really happy that they started to research their own history and becoming, creating a narrative. So these narratives are important, and being in the discourse is important. So everyone have his story of his community. You have, I have. I will tell you tomorrow about Kaunas, which I am passionate about. But I think it's a process. So right now, at a certain point of time and space, we are in such positions. But tomorrow might be different.
Okay, so our time is running. Now, the last question by
Before
Adam.
I will ask, one comment is that you know the concept of Pandora's box. Unfortunately, this is not my thought, but heritage is a Pandora's box, and this is it. What I'd like to comment. And the question, this is $1 million question, $10 million question, guys, for you this time.
We are not rich, so it's not possible to answer.
For the side which I would like to rescue, this is like $100 million, even more what is needed. But the question is, okay, we are before the political decision to protect the site, to rescue the site, heritage site. But you definitely know that the interpretation will be completely improper without the critical approach. And decision is to do or not to do, protect or not protect the site. This is, by the way, there is no tangible heritage, Mr. Gorzelik. Protect or not?
There are tangible carriers.
Okay, so simple answer, protect or not? Did it or
no,
not? For all of you.
Leave it as it is.
Okay.
Can I say something? I had in mind, I didn't want to say, but you provoked me. I think it can be protected, but for example, as is in one of your slides, I would like you to expand more that concept, maybe as a horror museum. Why not? For example, an industrial site as an horror museum. You can stress different things. For example, as in your slide was saying, like slavery, mass migration, climate change, all of the things that the Industrial Revolution brought, no? And just thinking about the question of the guy before, since it's even decaying, it would be a great horror museum, maybe. I don't know.
Sorry, I must add something. Can you imagine this function for this old harbor in the middle of Trieste?
For sure.
And the locals, you think they will be happy with that?
I think you made the example, for example, of Marcinelle before, no? And you show the superhero of Marcinelle. If you go to Italy and in lots of square in Italy, there are plaques for the dead people of Marcinelle.
Yes.
So it's yeah, and so it depends on the perspective. Obviously, the harbor of Trieste, the old harbor of Trieste, it's the symbol of Austro-Hungarian Empire and all of this stuff, but it's the symbol as well. And honestly, I don't know precisely the history of the old harbor of Trieste, but I should get into the dynamics of the port in order to say if it can be an horror monument or not. Maybe the guys of Trieste can tell me more about, I don't know.
My answer would be that between black and white, there is always endless number of shades of gray.
Thank you.
Shall we stop our discussion at this
one remark.
diplomatic
Only one
answer?
remark.
Okay. Yeah,
if you-
short remark, because we are
yes.
running out of time.
So,
But
if we assume that critical heritage isn't to produce authorized heritage discourses, there is no notion of improper interpretation.
yeah. So, thank you for your participation, for such an interesting answers, reflections, and also performance, showing that it is about discussion, debates, and negotiations. And thank you for wonderful questions from the audience. That's it for today. See you tomorrow at 10 in the lecture by Vaidas Petrulis.
Welcome, welcome.